The first thing I noticed was not the broken window. It was the note. A single piece of paper, folded once, placed flat in the center of the kitchen table where the laptop used to be. The laptop was gone. The lockbox was gone. The safe behind the bookshelf was open and empty. Every document my mother had left for me, every photograph, every piece of paper that had cracked this family open gone. And in the middle of all that emptiness, one note. I did not touch it immediately. I stood in the doorway of the lake house kitchen, and I looked at it from across the room. The way you look at something when some part of you already knows it is going to change the shape of everything. Then I walked to the table. I picked it up. I read it. 3 words. My mother's handwriting. Unmistakable. Do not trust me either. I set the note back down on the table. I sat down in the same chair where I had watched her face on that screen 5 days ago. The same chair where I had pressed play and heard her say, "If you are watching this, then they think I am dead." The same chair where everything I thought I understood about my family had come apart and reassembled into something darker and more precise. I sat in that chair and I looked at those 3 words and I thought, she knew this was coming. She left this for me on purpose. Which means whatever happened here, whatever was taken, whatever was moved, she expected it. She planned for it. And she still did not tell me. That was the moment I understood that part 1 of the story was not what I thought it was. Let me tell you where we were 5 days after the board meeting. Because I need you to feel the ground under our feet before I tell you how it shifted. My father had been publicly exposed. The financial crimes investigation had been formally opened. His chief advisor, the man I will call the accountant because his name does not deserve more space than that, had been placed on administrative hold pending the scope of the inquiry. The board of my father's company had suspended his executive authority. The press had a version of the story, not the full version, but enough. And my mother, Sylvia, was alive and staying 2 hours away at a property belonging to a friend, calling me every evening at 7 o'clock. Warm and steady and apparently fine. Apparently. That word is doing a lot of work now that I look back on it. The lake house had been mine for 5 days. My mother had told me to use it as long as I needed, that it was safe, that no one else knew about it except the people who were supposed to know. I had been sleeping there, working from there, meeting with my attorney there, treating it as a base. A sanctuary. The place where the truth had first been handed to me, and where I felt most anchored while everything outside continued to move. I had driven up that morning because I had forgotten a folder. An ordinary reason. The most ordinary possible reason to be in a specific place at a specific time. And instead I found the broken window, the emptied safe, the missing documents, and those 3 words from my mother. I did not call her immediately. I want to be clear about that decision because it matters. My first instinct was to pick up the phone, dial her number, and demand an explanation. But I had learned something in the previous 5 days, a lesson I was still absorbing, which is that the person who reacts fastest is almost never the person who wins. So I put my phone face down on the table. I looked at the note again. I looked at the broken window. I looked at the open safe. And I asked myself the only question that mattered. What does she want me to do next? Because this was deliberate. The broken window was a message too. Not just the note, all of it. Someone had come here and taken the documents, yes. But my mother had known they were coming. And she had not warned me. She had not moved the documents herself, or told me to move them. She had let it happen. And she had left 1 piece of paper behind to make sure I understood that the taking had been anticipated. Which meant the documents were not gone. They were moved. By whoever she had trusted to move them. To wherever she had decided they needed to go next. The question was where. And the question behind that question was, why did she not tell me? I picked up the note again, and turned it over. On the back, in the same handwriting, so small I had almost missed it. Storage unit. Blue Ridge Road. Box 7. She had not left me nothing. She had left me the next step. Hidden on the back of a warning she knew would make me look twice. My grandmother used to say, the women in this family do not hide things because they are afraid. They hide things because they are patient. Learn the difference, and you will understand everything. I was beginning to understand. If you're still listening, drop where you're watching from in the comments. And if you're new here, Subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Blue Ridge Road was 40 minutes north. A small self-storage facility. The kind with an outdoor keypad and numbered roll-up doors and nobody watching. I found box 7 without difficulty. The same brass key from the gravedigger opened it. Inside, 2 boxes. Both sealed with tape. Both labeled in my mother's handwriting. The first box held files. Every document that had been in the lake house safe, plus more. More than I had seen before. Account statements going back further than the ones in the original envelope. Correspondence I had never seen. Contracts. And one folder at the very top, labeled with a single word that stopped me cold. Wallace. I did not know that name yet. I would come to know it very well. But standing in that storage unit with the morning light cutting in through the open door, I set the Wallace folder aside and opened the second box. Inside was a recording device. Small. Digital. The kind a journalist might carry. And attached to it with a rubber band. Another note. Play this before you read anything else. I pressed play. My mother's voice came through the small speaker, clear and close, like she was standing in the unit with me. Dara. If you are hearing this, then they got to the lake house before you could secure it. That means the timeline moved faster than I planned. I need you to stay calm. Nothing critical was lost. Everything critical is in those boxes. But I need to tell you something I should have told you before the board meeting, and I need you to hear it without putting the recording down, no matter how it makes you feel. I held the device with both hands. I did not fake my death only to escape your father, she said. I faked my death because I needed everyone to move. Your father, the accountant, and one other person whose name you do not have yet. The board meeting was not the end of the plan. It was the middle. I needed them to believe they had won long enough to make the next move. The documents your father's people just took from the lake house, I let them take them. Those are the decoy files. The real records are in box 1. What I needed was for them to take the bait, believe they had recovered everything, and go quiet. And now they will. I exhaled slowly. There is a man connected to all of this, she continued. He is not your father. He is not the accountant. He is someone I have known longer than either of them, and what I am about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear. I need you to hear it anyway. She paused. I could hear her breathing on the recording, steadying herself. The person who originally introduced your father to the accountant was not a coincidence. That introduction was arranged. Deliberately. By someone who needed your father positioned exactly where he ended up, running a firm large enough to be worth targeting, married to a woman with hidden assets worth pursuing. Your father was not the architect of what happened to this family. He was the instrument.
The person who built the structure around him, who placed the pieces and waited for them to align, has never been in any room you have seen him in publicly. He works from the outside. He has been working from the outside for over 20 years. She stopped again. When she spoke next, her voice had dropped lower. His name is in the Wallace folder. Do not say it out loud until you have spoken to the attorney. And Dara, I need you to understand something. I did not tell you this before the board meeting because I needed you to be genuinely surprised. Not performing surprise. Actually surprised. Because the people watching you in that room were looking for performance. They needed to believe you did not know the full picture. If you had known everything, they would have seen it. And the next step of the plan would have closed before it opened. I stood in the storage unit for a long time after the recording ended. She had used me. Not cruelly. Not carelessly. But deliberately and with calculation. She had given me exactly enough of the truth to do what needed to be done, and had withheld the rest to protect the operation. She had made me a piece of the plan without telling me I was a piece of the plan. I am not going to tell you that did not hurt. It did. It hurt in the specific, airless way that things hurt when the person who causes the pain is also the person you love most. I stood in that storage unit and I breathed through it, and I let it be what it was, and then I picked up the Wallace folder and I started reading. What was in that folder took me the rest of the morning to get through. Wallace was a man my mother had known since before she married my father. A financier. Quiet, careful, operating in the background of large transactions for decades. He and my mother had built something together over 22 years, a parallel financial structure held under her maiden name, grown slowly and carefully to a size that would matter when the moment came. $41 million, accumulated not by accident but by design, as what the folder's own documents described as a contingency architecture. A system built to survive the marriage. Built because my mother had known, earlier than any of us realized, that the marriage might not. But Wallace was also connected to the person my mother called the architect. And the architect, whose name I found on the third page of the Wallace folder, was someone I had eaten dinner with. Someone who had sat in our living room. Someone who had given a toast at my parents' 20th anniversary party and made my mother laugh and shaken my father's hand and looked me in the eye across a table more times than I could count. I am not going to say his name here yet. The legal process is still moving and my attorney has advised me on what I can and cannot say publicly at this stage. What I will tell you is that reading his name in that folder was the closest I have come in this entire ordeal to sitting down on the floor and not getting back up. Because it meant that the betrayal was not one layer deep. It was not 2 layers. It went all the way down to the foundation. To a relationship that predated my parents' marriage. To a man who had watched this family from the inside for my entire life and had been building something with the materials of us the whole time. I closed the folder. I called my attorney from the storage unit. He answered on the second ring. I told him I was at the storage facility. I told him I had the documents. I told him there was a new name. He went very quiet in the way that lawyers go quiet when they are rapidly restructuring everything they thought they knew about a case. Do not move those boxes, he said. I am going to send someone to you within 2 hours. Do not call your mother until after that meeting. I know, I said. Dara, are you all right? I looked at the 2 boxes in front of me. I looked at the recorder in my hand. I looked at the Wallace folder. Sitting on top of everything. I will be, I said, when this is finished. The person my attorney sent was a forensic analyst, a quiet woman who arrived in an unmarked car and spent 90 minutes photographing and cataloging every document in both boxes without asking me a single personal question, which I appreciated more than I can express. When she was done, she sealed the boxes in evidence bags, handed me receipts, and left. The boxes went into a secure facility. My attorney now had everything. Then I called my mother. She answered immediately, the way she always did when she knew I had something to say. I did not give her a greeting. I said, I found the storage unit. I listened to the recording. I read the Wallace folder. I know about the architect. And I need you to tell me right now, is there anything else I do not know? Anything at all? A silence that lasted long enough to have a shape. Yes, she said. I closed my eyes. Tell me. Wallace is dead, she said. He died 3 weeks ago. Before the funeral. Before any of this became public. And what he left behind, there is a will, Dara. A very specific will. With a 30-day window. And if we do not respond to that window in time, everything we built together goes somewhere else. Where? I asked. To the architect's brother, she said. Who has been waiting for it for years. Who the architect has been preparing and funding for exactly this contingency. I sat down on the concrete floor of the storage unit. How many days do we have left? I asked. 16, she said. 16 days. That was the shape of the trap. Not the trap we had set for my father. The trap that had been set for us, years before either of us fully understood we were inside it. The board meeting, the exposure, the investigation, all of it had been real and all of it had been necessary. But underneath it, running on a parallel track, was this. A clock we had not known was ticking. My mother had known. She had known since Wallace died. She had been managing the timeline of the board meeting around the timeline of the will, trying to expose my father and the accountant before the window closed, trying to move fast enough on both tracks at once alone. There is an expression my grandmother had for moments when you realize the full weight of what someone has been carrying without telling you. She would say, do not be angry at the person who carried it alone. Be angry at the thing that made them feel they had to. I was not angry at my mother. I was something more complicated than angry. I was undone, briefly, by the scale of what she had been holding, and by the fact that she had still, even now, even after everything, not handed it to me until I came and found it myself. "Listen to me," I said. "We are doing this together from right now. Not you planning and me executing. Together. Do you understand?" A pause. "Yes," she said, and her voice on that word was different from any version of her voice I had heard in all the recordings and all the phone calls and all the years before this. It was smaller, more tired, more real. "Good," I said. "Then start from the beginning. Tell me everything about the architect. Everything about Wallace's will. Everything you know about the brother. Leave nothing out." She talked for 2 hours. I listened without interrupting. I took notes in a small notebook I had started carrying in my coat pocket the week before, because I had learned that in situations like this one, your memory is the least reliable thing you have. You write things down. You keep the record. You do not trust your own recollection when the stakes are this high. When she finished, I had 4 pages of notes, 3 names that mattered, and a picture of what had been happening around my family's life that was so much larger and so much older than anything I had understood that I had to stop and recalibrate everything. The way you recalibrate after you find out the map you have been using was drawn for a different territory. The architect had not targeted my father because my father was powerful. He had targeted my father because my father was useful. A man with enough ambition to be leveraged, enough vanity to be flattered, enough financial exposure to be positioned. The architect had introduced the accountant to my father, yes. But before that, he had introduced himself to my mother, years earlier, and had spent that time learning exactly what she had. What she was building. Where it was held. What it would be worth. He had needed her out of the way. My father, with the right encouragement, had been the tool for that. And Wallace, my mother's partner, who had known the architect longer than anyone, who had understood what was being constructed around my mother long before my mother fully understood it herself, had built the will as a countertrap, a mechanism, a way of ensuring that if my mother survived, she would inherit the ammunition she needed to finish it. And if she did not survive, the 30-day window and the secondary clause would expose the architect's brother as the beneficiary, creating a paper trail that a good attorney could follow all the way back. Wallace had been protecting my mother from inside the architect's own plan, building an exit inside the trap. But he had died before he could tell her the full shape of what he had built, which meant my mother had been navigating the last 3 weeks with half the map. And now I had the other half. This is where I want to be precise about what changed in me, because I think it matters for how you understand what came next. Before the lake house, before the gravedigger and the key and the board meeting, I was a person who trusted the people around her and managed life with diligence and intelligence, but without the particular quality of attention that comes from knowing you are being played. After the lake house, after my father, I was sharper, more careful, capable of strategy in a way I had not been before. But this was something else. This was understanding that the game was bigger than I thought and that I was in it whether I had chosen to be or not. And the choice in front of me was not whether to play. It was whether to play to win. I chose to win. I spent the next 72 hours in consecutive motion. My attorney, working with a forensic analyst, built a supplemental submission for the financial crimes investigation that incorporated the architect's name and his connection to the accountant and the paper trail from the Wallace folder. This did not happen quickly or cleanly. It happened through careful, methodical documentation that required my mother and me to sit across a table from 2 attorneys for 12 hours on a Saturday, going through 22 years of records, confirming signatures, establishing timelines, building the kind of case that does not rest on accusation but on architecture. On showing, document by document, how one man had constructed a system using other people's lives as the frame. At the same time, I was making a different kind of move. The architect did not know we had the Wallace folder. His people had taken the decoy files from the lake house and believed they had what they needed. He was operating on the assumption that my mother was in retreat, that the investigation had her attention and her resources, and that the clock on Wallace's will was running down quietly toward the moment the assets would transfer to his brother. I needed him to keep believing that. So I did something deliberate. I made sure, through a specific set of channels, that word reached the architect's circle that my mother was overwhelmed. That she was focused entirely on my father's legal situation and had not yet engaged an attorney regarding the estate matter. That the 30-day window was at risk of being missed. I made them comfortable. My grandmother used to say, "Let a man believe he is winning, and he will show you exactly how he planned to do it." The architect moved exactly the way I expected. He had his attorney send a quiet inquiry to Wallace's estate representative, laying early groundwork for the secondary transfer claim. Premature, careful, designed to look routine. But the inquiry existed. It was on paper. It named his brother as the anticipated beneficiary, and it named the architect as the coordinating party. My attorney received a copy within 24 hours. It was the most direct connection between the architect and the inheritance mechanism that we had in the record. Combined with the Wallace folder documentation, the accountant's growing cooperation with investigators, and my mother's formal acknowledgement of the partnership assets filed that same morning, stopping the 30-day clock permanently, it was enough. Not enough to finish everything. I want to be honest about that. These things do not finish in a single moment. The investigations continue. The legal processes run at their own pace. My father, the accountant, the architect, none of them are fully resolved yet. What was filed and what was submitted and what was placed in the record is now in the hands of processes larger than this family and more patient than any of us. But the shape of it had changed. The architect, who had spent 20 years operating from the outside, was now inside the record. Named. Connected. Exposed not by accident and not by confrontation, but by his own movement, made from a position of false confidence, into a trap he did not know was there until it had already closed. My mother and I drove back to the lake house together on the evening of the 16th day. The day the window closed and the assets were formally secured. She had not been back since before her faked death, and she stood in the doorway for a long time before she went in. I watched her look around the kitchen. The table. The shelf where the lockbox had been. The window I had replaced the week before after the break-in. She did not say anything for a while. She moved through the room slowly, like someone taking inventory of a place they thought they might never see again. Then she sat down at the kitchen table, and she looked at the chair across from her until I came and sat in it. "I owe you an apology," she said. "Not one apology. Several." "Yes," I said. "You do." She looked at her hands. "I kept things from you because I did not want you carrying what I was carrying. I told myself it was protection." "I know," I said. "And I also know that is true. And I also know it was not the whole reason." She looked up. "You did not fully trust me," I said. "Not as an accusation. As a fact. Not at the beginning. Maybe not even in the middle. You trusted me with pieces. You watched what I did with the pieces before you decided whether to hand me the rest." A long silence. "Yes," she said finally. "That is true. I understand it," I said. "I do not love it. But I understand it. The women in this family do not open easily. You told me that once, years ago, and I did not know you were talking about yourself." She was quiet for a moment. "Then, your grandmother said that first." "I know," I said. We sat in that kitchen until it was dark outside, the lake invisible beyond the windows, just the dock light catching the water in a thin silver strip the way it always did. We talked through all of it, the parts she had hidden and the parts one had found and the parts that were still unresolved and the parts that might never be clean or simple or finished in the way you want the things that hurt you to be finished. There is a version of this story where it ends here. Where the kitchen and the dock light and the tea going cold on the table is the final image. Where what came before was enough. But the next morning my phone rang. It was the gravedigger. Not a relative. Not a hired hand. The actual man from the cemetery, with the weathered face and the steady hands and the voice so low I had almost missed it under the sound of rain. I had not spoken to him since the funeral. I had not known how to reach him. And yet here was his name on my screen, in my contacts, under an entry I did not remember saving. My mother had put it there. At some point in the previous 2 weeks, without telling me, she had put his number in my phone. I answered. He said 4 words. She did not tell you everything. I looked across the table at my mother, who was watching me with an expression I had never seen on her face in 31 years. Not guilt exactly. Not fear. Something more complicated. Something that looked, the longer I looked at it, like the face of someone who had been waiting for this particular moment for a very long time. And for the first time since the funeral, since the empty coffin and the brass key and the lake house and all the rooms inside the rooms of the story, I did not know what came next. I did not know if my mother was protecting me, or if she had been using me all along. Thank you for listening. Not everyone stays until the end, but you did, and I do not take that lightly.